Welcome, fans, to a live edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast here on thehannibaltv.com. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. And we have a very special guest tonight, a man I've been looking forward to interviewing for about a year following the release of the successful Netflix series on OVW. But now we're talking a whole different level. The man is a featured player in the very successful hit Paramount TV series Tulsa King, starring Sylvester Stallone. He plays Bigfoot in that, and the season finale for season 2 has dropped today, so it's very, very germane timing. But we're going to, in addition to Tulsa King, get into his very extensive and accomplished pro wrestling career. And I would be talking about none other than Mike Cashflow, now Bigfoot Walden. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be here, Jack. Nice to finally be able to chat with you after you and I, going back and forth for quite a while. So, I'm anxious to hear what you'd like to ask.
Well, I think one of the baselines that fans appreciate when we do these long form career deep dives is the question that seems to come up again and again, which is when you were growing up, were you a fan of the pro wrestling business? And if so, what territories or companies did you follow?
Absolutely. I was raised by my grandparents. So, sitting in front of a TV with my grandfather, every wrestling show that was on TV at that time was on my television every day of the week, twice on weekends. I'm a 605 guy. I'm a Southern wrestling guy. I never knew about the Northern wrestling other than the Vern Gagne territory because they had played that on ESPN. I never knew about, Vince and the WWE and then the WWF. I never knew about that until the early 90s, I guess, right before the Monday Night Wars, when I guess he started expanding and a lot of the other wrestlings that I would watch was going away and you would just see these constant reruns. So, like I said, I was a Southern guy, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, the old Crockett territory, Florida Championship Wrestling. I had later in my childhood got into watching, guys like Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen. And, I was a real big fan even further back of Wahoo McDaniel, Manny Fernandez, some of those huge feuds back in that time. So, I have some experience watching, the Von Erichs down in Texas. I grew up in all those, the Southern wrestling, that was my atmosphere. That really is what got me into it. That stuff was real, and when Manny Fernandez and Wahoo McDaniel would go at it, it really sucked me in. So that's where it started for me, from the TV with my grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there a point where you decided, to give pro wrestling a go as a career, notwithstanding, you especially for that time frame, you fit right into that large individual. Or was it something that you always had in the back of your mind and you went after at a later date?
I liken professional wrestling to professional sports. Coming through school, I was a sports guy, played a lot of basketball, some football. And when I got out of school, professional sports was still in my mind. At that time, the opportunity arose to, the mid 90s arose to go to a wrestling school. I was introduced to, somebody that had come to Louisville and was running a wrestling school around this area. And that's what, it caught my eye and I went all in. And it was a tough go. It was a tough go, back in the mid '90s. I hate to say, back then and all that stuff, but at that time, it was tough to, you had to fight your way in, and I did what I had to do and kind of rode the wave ever since.
Would you be speaking about training under Ian Rotten?
I would be speaking under IWA Mid South. Yes, I would. It was a hoot. I'll just say that. A lot of bumps, a lot of bruises. Got beat up a whole lot. It was tough. It was a tough way to break in. That literally was a school of hard knocks. Every wrestler out there say they come up in the school of hard knocks. I come up in the school of hard knocks. You had to fight your way in. That's for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I mean, IWA had a very significant reputation for being a hardcore promotion. What was that like as a guy breaking in to start off at such a violent sort of company, or at least as was the reputation?
That particular type of wrestling was just introduced, around with Paul Heyman and ECW at that time. And I didn't know of too many people, one, maybe another one that was doing that in the States at that time. And, for somebody that wanted to prove his chops and wanted to be a tough guy, that was the way to go. You get in and you be the toughest SOB around, and then maybe everybody else will start believing that you're the toughest SOB around, and maybe you can get some exposure, and then maybe you can start building something for yourself. So I was all for it, and yes, I participated as much as I could in that. What we built there at IWA Mid South in the late '90s and early 2000s was something to something to talk about. Of course, what the later incarnations became. It is what it is. I had nothing to do with it back then, in those later carnations. But what we built from the mid to late '90s and in the early 2000s, that was something to talk about. We created an aura which carried that particular company for the rest of its existence. That came out. It was the place to be, and everybody wanted to be there. And that's evident by, the matches that IWA Mid-South put on, from the mid 2000s till, whenever it kind of shut down and quit running shows. So, it was something special at that time.
And we'll get into some of those classic opponents and encounters that you had. But I wanted to talk about two-part question in terms of you've been involved in all kinds of hardcore and to use the parlance, gimmick matches. We're talking barbed wire, war games, light tubes, that whole kit and caboodle. With the punishment that is inherent in there and the absolute risk, as we've seen in some situations where they've gone south. How do you wrap your mind around that in terms of preparing for it, working that type of match as opposed to just a usual singles or tag? And second part is that style, and especially IWA, was the subject of a lot of criticism from wrestling critics such as Jim Cornette and state athletic commissions, et cetera, et cetera. How would you respond to those critics that to this day even state that that's really, there's no place for that in the pro wrestling product?
All right, part one.
Sorry, that's a lot.
You can't really prepare, for what it is you're going to get into. It has to be, you have to be willing to go all or nothing. And you have to be willing to try and do it as carefully as you possibly can do. Other than that, there's no preparing for stuff like that. There really isn't. It's just It's just a state of mind. You know, you get into wrestling because you want to be a tough guy. And this takes being a tough guy to a whole new level. You know, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, would I have risked it? You know, would I have taken those risks? I may have walked a similar road. I think I would have done some things a little bit different. And this is going to go into the second part of this equation. You know, Al Snow and Jim Cornette and a lot of those guys, they come from a different time. Okay. Hardcore wrestling is definitely a niche. It's a very far off side niche of the entertainment, you know, part. Is it necessarily professional wrestling? That's what's on the marquee for it. I don't think so much. You know, it's more of a Coliseum gladiator type thing that people have kind of created with it out of professional wrestling. So, you know, there is a niche for it. There are guys that are successful, albeit, you know, they can't be successful long, you know, because of what it is. You know, they can make names for themselves in that particular niche. I'm not taking anything away from the guys that do that. You know, more power to them. If that's what they choose to do, hey, do it as safe as you can. Make as much money as you can. Okay, it's what they want to do. You know, the guys that like I said, the guys that criticize it and knock it, and they have every reason to be able to do that. You know, I've heard Cornette just go off on it, and is he wrong? No. You know, from where he stands, he's exactly right on his opinion. Same with Al. You know, where he stands, he's exactly right on his opinion. And he's done his share of it. Mm-hmm. You know, Al has. It wasn't quite his niche, but he's done his share of it. You know, he knows, he's been there. So what he says, he brings to, hey, I've been there, guys. You know, you're messing yourself up. Okay. They're entitled to their opinion, and from where they stand, they're absolutely correct. But from where the guys that are in it stand, you know, you just have to look at it. It's not necessarily professional wrestling. It's an entertainment offshoot that was born from what professional wrestling is. Okay. And that's just what it is.
Do you think that notwithstanding the toll on the wrestlers, but in states that still have athletic commissions or just the general media surrounding covering wrestling, do you think that for what wrestling draws, hardcore wrestling, I'm thinking the death match promotions that look backyard, et cetera, but do you think it's really when it comes down to the bottom line, worth all the risk and all the punishment?
That's on an individual basis, Jack. You got to ask the guys that are doing it, you know, the paydays that they get, you know, how their body feels, you know, how their families are taking all that. That is really a question for them. I don't do it anymore. To me, obviously, it was not worth it, you know, because I stopped doing that years ago. But for the guys that still are, and from what they go through, I guarantee you ask them, and it's worth it 10 times over, especially the guys that have been doing it 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. You know, the Madman Pondos, the Gages of the world. You know, I guarantee you they will say that it's worth it. And you can't take that away from them because that is their life that they choose to live. You know, who is anybody else, you know, who are they to tell them how to live? You know, they can speak to their blue in the face, you know, if that's what they want to do and that's what they choose to do, you know, then they deserve to do it. That's what life's all about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the first fan questions that were sent to me for you, we're gonna ask right now, and that since we're on IWA, a fan wanted to know about what your highlight moment was there, or if you had a favorite match. And it's interesting that you mentioned Pondo because I'm going to ask you about Pondo next. But what would you place as your favorite IWA moment if you had to delineate that?
That's a long time ago, Jack. You know, you're that's a big ask. I don't know if it was really um one particular moment, per se, because I had to fight for everything I had. I didn't necessarily, honestly, I'm just gonna be honest, I didn't necessarily get the best, the greatest shake in IWA Mid South, even though I was, the first guy to come through the school other than, rolling hard. I wasn't really looked upon as somebody that was probably pegged to succeed. I didn't get a lot of the high profile matches, but whenever I got an opportunity to be in the ring with like guys like Tracy Smothers and Bull Payne and Tommy Rich and the guys that I idolized growing up, got to watch, etc. Anytime that I got to be anywhere near a locker room or even be able to get in the ring with those guys was an extreme highlight for me. Getting to be in the ring with Punk, obviously was a highlight. I wouldn't have thought it would have been a highlight then, but as successful as Punk has come through and has made himself, that turns out to be a highlight for me. Getting to do that with him, before he was actually, located and seen, for his talent and what he was able to do in professional wrestling. So, one of those highlights was, the actual match that, that actually got him the exposure he needed was, the match he had with Guerrero and Mysterio. I was actually on that card, and I keep it, to this day, because it's got some of my people on it. I'll explain it to you, but it's a huge flyer from that show in Chicago or around Chicago. And I'm actually on that flyer with all those guys. And, it's actually signed by, the late Eddie Guerrero, the late Sherry Martel. It's signed by Hero. Of course, I let Punk sign it, Ray sign it, so it's that was a pretty big highlight for me when it comes to IWA Mid-South. Other than, just being there and helping to build that IWA Mid-South and watching it, turn into, something great. And then, that was the highlight for me, being able to be a part of something that to this day people still talk about. So,
well, here we are. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the Punk title match. Before we leave that entirely, I wanted to get your thoughts on, were you surprised after being around Punk in the locker room, facing him in the ring, given the fact that he was on the small side, et cetera, that he would go on to have that career that he did? Or did you see that germinating in Punk at the time?
No doubt about it. Punk was a star, when I think it took at that time, my thinking was why? Because like you said, he was on the smaller side, he didn't come out. He wasn't all flashy, the way he looked in ring, but he had what everybody needs to start out with. And then he created that for himself moving along. Like you said, did I think he was this huge star back then? No, but I watched as he progressed, and I seen how it was that he did what he did, and that says a lot for who Punk is and what he was able to do. So, 5 years after he left there, yes, I seen exactly, because he was able to, get in on the ground floor he made the right decisions to get in on the ground floor of places like Ring of Honor and places that were coming up, and getting in front of the right people is what you needed to do. And he made those decisions himself. So he had what it took up here. It's not just all what you do in the ring when it comes to making it in professional wrestling. It's about 80% what you do out of the ring that allows you to make it in professional wrestling. And when it comes to that, he had what it took. He wasn't the guy that was out partying, doing, enjoying all the distractions of pro wrestling. He was where he was wanting to be a professional wrestler, and he was wanting to be on the highest level that he could possibly be. And he took the steps and made the decisions to do that. So you could see that.
Got another fan question. Wanted to ask about your experience, and not just in IWA Mid South, but working a couple of guys that during that time frame were certainly big time independent legends in the United States, or have grown to be such. The first one being Madman Pondo. You worked quite a bit, and then I'll get to the next individual after that.
I consider Pondo a mentor to me. He was the type of guy that would he would offer you to jump in his car. He would offer if you didn't have any money to buy you something to eat. He would offer if you were upset or you were thinking something because say you didn't feel like you were getting booked correctly or something like that. He would offer up advice and help keep your mind right. Pondo was never one to big league anybody. He was always there to help. I owe Pondo a huge debt of gratitude for taking care of me all throughout some of those early years. And I still call Pondo my friend to this day. I still, every now and again, I'll say hi to him or something like that. I still keep track of what he's doing. For him to be able to still be doing what he's doing, going back and forth to Japan is that's an amazing thing. He's coming up on 40 years doing what he's doing. So, that should be celebrated. He's one of those guys that has done it his way, from that old, where I don't know if you've seen it, where I don't know, it was one of his first incarnations where he got in front and what was his name? The old longtime heavyweight champion for Vince Sr. Was it San Martino? When San Martino was doing some commentary?
Bruno? Yeah, Bruno.
Yeah. He was doing some commentary and Pondo come in the ring and he bashed Pondo left and right all over the place, was being nasty and all that stuff. And, for Pondo to go from that to, as many tours in Japan as an American as anybody, that deserves to be celebrated, and he's one of the good ones. He didn't let all the distractions of professional wrestling eat away at him. So, my hat's off to Pondo. When you're talking about Pondo, I'll defend him all day long.
And the fan was asking about, another high profile independent hardcore guy, Necro Butcher.
Ooh, I've had some wars with Necro. If I'm not mistaken, his health has failed a little bit in his later years, hasn't it?
Yes.
Necro had that aura. It was hard. It's funny getting in the ring with Necro Butcher was a hoot for the guys, for the boys, because we would always, because he had a hard time seeing. He was kind of blind, and when he would come with some of those shots, you kind of had to protect yourself, and you had to give right back just as good as you got. And it was always a time. I remember one time we were in Detroit, Michigan, and Necro Butcher, he used to come to the ring with a real pig head that he had got from a local butcher, wherever he went or whatever. He'd come to the ring chewing on the ear. The fans' reactions to Necro Butcher was something else. The shows were always fun that he was on because, he legitimately had that Bruiser Brody type vibe whenever he'd come to the ring. Extremely smart, intelligent guy. If you heard him talk, it was like night and day. You would not see the Necro Butcher, when you talk to Dylan. Okay, you wouldn't see that. So, he was an interesting guy to be around. I knew him a little bit. There was a short time frame that we spent time on shows together. After that, not so much. I didn't really keep in touch with him too much, but he did his thing. You know, he got to be in that movie with Mickey Rourke, you know,
Yeah,
the wrestler.
wrestler. Yeah.
You know, that's an accomplishment for him. You know, I'm glad for him. It was an extremely well written. There was it Aronofsky. Is that who wrote it?
Yeah. Darren Aronofsky. Yeah.
It was an extremely good movie. You know, he got to be a part in it. So, you know, my hat's off to him as well. He did things the way he wanted to do them. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I worked with him about a decade ago, and he was an extremely nice guy too. Like you said, not like his crazed persona. What was your pathway then to Ohio Valley, and did you ever look at TNA at the time? They were making some waves, or any other promotion before that, considering you were correct me if I'm wrong, fairly seasoned by the time you got into the OVW stream.
I don't think that I ever looked at TNA per se. You know, I can't really remember why. I don't know, you know, where my head was at that time. You know, there was a time where, yeah, I was fairly seasoned, and after, you know, I kind of got rubbed the wrong way, you know, there for a period of time. And pro wrestling was, you know, it was just kind of a project, a pet project. You know, it wasn't something that you know, I went from giving my all to, you know, is this, you know, I was questioning a lot. I was going through a time where I was questioning a lot. And,
Due
you
to
know,
politics, or
do what?
due to politics or something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. Politics was, and it was something that I always told myself I wasn't going to get into the middle of. Um, and I kind of, it kind of was there, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. So, you know, I took a step back, started to reevaluate some things, and, you know, I still took a few indie bookings here and there, but, you know, I wasn't full steam ahead like I was in, you know, that mid 90s, early 2000s. I just wasn't, you know, I was looking at other things. But, you know, it's funny that you mentioned, you know, Madman Pondo, because you asked me about OVW. My first stint with OVW came because Madman Pondo and a guy named Too Tough Tony come to me and said, "Hey, we're going to do this invasion angle. We're working for the Juggalos, you know, the Insane Clown Posse, and they run a wrestling fed." Well, the early 2000s, I had done one of their very first wrestling tour with Violent J and Shaggy, and I ended up doing the Gathering. Well, around 2009, 2010, Pondo and Tony, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're going to do this invasion angle where the Juggalo Championship Wrestling invades OVW. Do you want to be a part of it?" Well, yeah. You know, I said, "Sure, let's do it." And I ended up spending about a year and a half there. And it was an entirely different thing OVW was at that time. Danny still had the reins. Of course, you know, there was a guy named Ray Ramsey there. Dean Hill was still there. You know, there was all kinds of different things going on. You know, a whole lot of Chiefs, you know, not a whole lot of Indians, that's for sure. Or, you know, so there was a lot of guys trying to run things. And it was it was kind of a pain in the rear end to do. Well, I ended up lasting longer than Tony and Pondo. Pondo went about his way. I think Tony at that time had lost his Kentucky State wrestling license. I can't remember, you know, the whole story or whatever. I ended up staying on for, you know, probably about another 6 months or 8 months doing some work with their, at that time his name was Beef, but I think is the name most people know him by is Brad Brad Maddox.
Oh yes, from WWE, his stint there.
Yeah, he was in there. You know, it was kind of a developmental thing for him there. He was doing a gimmick called Beef. You know, they put their heavyweight championship on him, and so I did a little thing with him. And when I got to the back, you know, I'd ask the guys, you know, so what's next? You know, I did this little program with him. You know, it's over with. What do you have for me? Well, they said we don't have anything for you. So back on the trail I went. You know, that was my last thing of OVW until 2016 is when I came back. So, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, you're which we'll talk about the Netflix series in a minute and how that all came together. But you clearly have homesteaded, so to speak, there in OVW. Were you looking, given the fact that it was for a long period of time a developmental to WWE? Were you did you have that sort of in the back of your mind, or like in terms of moving on, or were you happy with what you were doing there and then decided to become a staple there?
Well, everybody, it was an extremely good way to hone your craft there. I still took, a lot of indie bookings outside of OVW at that time, but those guys having that TV that they had, having those cameras and even if at that time they, in 2016, because that was well before Al Snow had bought it. Even in 2016, if you had your mind right, you could still teach yourself, segment, how to work segments, how to work the camera, how to do good, compelling vignettes. I mean, you could teach yourself all that stuff. And let's face it, all that stuff is very handy to have around if because everybody's goal is to make it to the highest level in professional wrestling, right? That was always still a goal. But, as time went on, I started to notice, what if we have all the ability to make a go of this, why don't we try to, elevate and bring ourselves up to, of course you're never going to, because of the money involved, you're never going to be as big as those guys, but that doesn't mean you can't make a few splashes in a bigger pond, right? Why not try to build something from the ground up instead of putting all your energy into going somewhere where you don't know what's going to happen one day or the next? Let's face it. How much pressure is really on you when you get to that highest level? You could be there one day and gone the next. Even if they're still paying you for a year, you could be there on TV one day and, gone. Why not try to build something and feel good about saying, hey, guess what I did? Because, I was even at that time, I was not a spring chicken, 2016, I was not a spring chicken. It might have already have been too late for me. You could never tell me that. You couldn't, I was feeling good. My body was, I'm still feeling good, but it just, I wanted to make the most of where I was and what I was doing and who I was working for. And that's what I did. That's what I do everywhere I go. I want to make the most of where I'm at and who I'm working for. And, if that keeps me there, or if that, opens up the opportunities for me to go elsewhere, Jack, so be it. I'll take them. From this point, it's all about recognizing those opportunities and learning how to take advantage of them. Right.
One of our really insightful fans on the channel sent me this question, which I found kind of interesting too when you think about it. Notwithstanding your success in IWA and your independent, was it ever a case that you found frustrating in the business that here you are with size and a look that would really fit in what we call the old school WWF model? Big guy, big worker, even WCW up until the end. And then the business sort of flipped when WCW closed down, ECW closed down. We got the ROH phenomenon, the small guys. Did you ever feel that time frame for you worked against you, or was it just not a consideration that you were so much bigger than a lot of your peers?
You know what, Jack? And you hear a lot of the older school guys talk about it. I've heard Al Snow say this a lot. Being a super megastar in wrestling is really all about timing. You see, regardless of my look and how I was performing in the ring, and if that's not what, it's like you said, if that's not what was big at that time, it's not going to be. I'm not going to be used. used, or they're not going to have anybody to work with me, or they're not going to be able to tell any stories. Therefore, guess what? They're not going to spend any money on you. Maybe it was an ill-fated, time. I remember doing a Vince Russo podcast, and he actually, by talking to me, it was after, the Netflix show come out, and he actually said, sitting here talking to you, Cash, he said, I wonder, is the reason that you didn't make it because you were too nice in the business, and it was kind of an eye opener to me. And, I thought about it, and, but I told him, I said, look, Vince, I said, being too nice, I don't necessarily think that that's a thing, because, I'm not going to be one of those guys that's going to step all over and run over, because that's just not who I am. And at least, when the time comes that I can, I can safely say, professional wrestling is in the past, at least I'm going to say, look, I've done professional wrestling my way. And, you can say what you want. I've made my share of money in professional wrestling, and I've drawn my share of money for some promoters as well. So, and I'm still going to until wrestling says, it's time to go. Time to go, kid.
Mm-hmm. One of the most popular interviews that we've had on the channel throughout the years is anything involving Al Snow, who's also worked for us in Great North Wrestling. Before we ask about the Netflix series, I wanted to get your impressions of working with him and what he brought to the table for you in particular.
First of all, don't get it twisted. The mind for wrestling that Al Snow has is heads and shoulders above, 99% of the people that I've ever met in professional wrestling. I consider Al a mentor, albeit a friend. Do I agree with all of Al's opinions on things? Yeah, Al comes from a different time, than I do. So probably not. Does he deserve for me to respect his opinions, though? Absolutely. And do I? Yes, I absolutely do. He's not one to mince words. And, and in my case, because of where I come from and how long I've been doing it, that was extremely good for me, because not a lot of people will do that. They will, how you say it, they will yes man the hell out of me. They will brother the hell out of me. Mm. And that's not a way to learn, and they say when you stop learning, it's time to hang up the boots, So what he brought to the table for me was somebody that wasn't scared to tell me what he thought about what it was that I was doing, or what it was that he thought that I should be doing. And that, honestly, my later days in OVW, to now, to present, has actually elevated, who I am in the ring and what I've been able to do. And, I owe a lot of that to, being mentored by Al Snow and being able to work with Al and see how, he sees things as opposed to how I see things or how I think things should be. So, it's part of this, Al has created part of this. So,
So last year, Netflix dropped that series on OVW, the docu-series that honestly, had mainstream buzz in addition to the wrestling world. And you were a central figure to that. Your fans were talking about, even the entertainment columnists were talking about this guy Cash Flow and how compelling a story he had. When did you hear that this was because we hear that a lot in wrestling? Oh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and it never comes to fruition. Right. But when that really came together, what were you thinking, and were you surprised at how much the general public took to it, and your story in particular?
I wasn't surprised. I was thankful that the story that Greg, the director, I was thankful for the story that he told, because you see a lot of negativity in wrestling, a lot of things, dark side of the ring, a lot of things. And I said this, many times on many other podcasts that I've done about that the Netflix series. I was thankful for the positive light that was spun on professional wrestling. Even albeit, I'll say it, with Haley, with her story and with Darkstorm and those guys, it was still a rather positive. They were trying to work it out. They were trying to make, it was still a positive experience, and it was very real. You get questioned a lot. Was that really real? Was it? And that is absolutely how OVW was at that time. Nobody really held anything back. The guys that were squeamish and thought maybe they were holding things back, they weren't put on there. The producers and the directors, they could see that a mile away. They wanted genuine and they wanted real. And for the people that you saw, that's what they got. They got genuine and they got real. I think it was a really good thing for OVW, the Netflix show. I think it was a good thing for professional wrestling as a whole. People begging for a season 2, though. I've had a lot of people say, "Man, are they going to make a season 2?"
That's one of the questions I had for you, actually.
I haven't heard anything. I would definitely, sit there, because I don't think that story is finished. OVW has been one of the storied professional wrestling feds in the country, and I think there's a lot more to that story. Even with the characters that they featured, there's a lot more to those stories than they had time to put into 7 or 8 episodes that they did. So now, if you want to go back and talk about how it came about, there was a lot of reasons that came about. It wasn't just one reason. There was a lot of talking going on, okaying going on, what's happening, and that took place for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years before it even hit the ground running, before they even decided to do it. So, and then of course, all the time they spent filming, and then of course, all the time that it took for them to release it after they filmed it. So, I think it was probably a year and a half or so before they even started filming it that, they were all talking to see if, because I think they wanted to fill it out and see if there were really any stories there, the production company, the BBC studios and the director and all the producers and stuff like that. So, there was a lot going into that, and then they were all in, they were all up in our face for, however though many months that it was, they were all up in our face.
Did that wear on you or any of the other? I know Al talked about it in kind of in broad strokes in the series about the intrusiveness of the crew during stressful moments, et cetera, et cetera. Did that wear on you or anybody else?
I can only speak on my experience. It wore on us. Me and my wife and my kids, there were a lot of times where we would be sitting trying to have supper, and I'll just out of the blue get a phone call. Hey, we're pulling up. And when they pulled up, they'd pull up 4 vans deep. At that time I was living in a dead end street. You got 4 vans pulling out, and they're sticking cameras all in my yard and, in my driveway. And then they're coming in my kitchen, trying to stick lights. And it was, it was intrusive, but that's what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, they were going to try and get real, and, they got it. So.
Yeah, one of the interesting angles of the show a fan is asking about was the I can't remember the name of the guy who was the money guy, but they were asking whether he was for real with his how do I put it, his lack of I guess etiquette in terms of dealing with Al on the direction of the company, and was that animosity? First of all, was the guy for real? And was that animosity that seemed very palpable? Was that legitimate?
No, that was legit. You know, none of those conversations or anything that you heard wasn't something that wasn't said or heard when those cameras weren't around. And I think it's like that to this day. You know, different visions. You know, you have a lot of different owners at OVW. Okay, a lot of different opinions, and everybody don't share those opinions. You know, and it goes, and whoever is an owner, they have a right to their opinion, and they have opinions, and if they defer, guess what? There's going to be friction. You know, that's life around OVW, and that's life around OVW right now. So that's just the way it goes. That's that dynamic at OVW right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's that dynamic, and they captured that perfectly on those cameras for Netflix. So
Do you think on a whole, notwithstanding some of the rigors of filming and et cetera, but the company in terms of attendance, at least anecdotally, has got a sustained bump? Do you think that on a whole that it was a net positive, or how would you answer some of the critics with really old school thinking, but that it exposed OVW business too much? Do you think it was a net positive in the final analysis, or somewhere in between?
I've been asked this question, and there are times I was conflicted. At the same time, if you really sit down and think about it, everybody's always known what professional wrestling is. It's no secret. It's probably made the business harder because because our job is as pro wrestlers is to suspend disbelief. It's made our jobs harder. It's made the creative process harder. At the same time, it is a net positive because it brings more people in. It makes more people understand the things that it makes it more personable. And that's where you really draw tickets, and that's where you really draw money in professional wrestling, when they can feel what's going on, when they can believe in the whys and the characters of why they're doing what they're doing, or that's what really causes you to draw money. So being an older guy than what some of these young guys are nowadays, kayfabe was still a thing when I was coming in. This has been a super positive experience. And I think, for the public to be able to see, that positivity, I think that makes it even more a plus and a positive for professional wrestling and for OVW as a whole. And yes, it has, boosted their numbers, their production numbers, the attendance for their television programs, and attendance for their house shows. It expanded their roster. Everybody clamoring to be a part of OVW, and it's expanded the name. You sometimes still struggle with getting the dirt sheets to talk about OVW, but you know how that goes. What it is. OVW has taken steps to garner more exposure for themselves, and that Netflix series Wrestlers, it did a whole lot of that. So overall, yes, it was a positive. I would give it a positive. It could have been better, and just knowing what I know, it could have been a lot better, the exposure and whatnot. But that's stuff that's that's in the past now. So it is what it is. The numbers are up. The exposure is up. You got a lot of guys clamoring to be there. It's definitely positive. Definitely positive.
Well, we'll have to see if there's a season 2, because certainly the views supported that from what I understand. Now, moving on to one of the most successful streaming series this year, and I got to be honest, I'm a total mark for Tulsa King. One of being an old school Sly fan, and your performance, which we'll get into, stands out. Not just the big guy, the goon guy, but you could see that there's some depth to the Bigfoot character. But how did this tremendous opportunity come about for you?
It's kind of surreal, Jack. It really is. I've had an agent, an acting agent. I've been going out for roles for a little while, and I got an email one day. It was in March 2020, this year. It was in March of this year, and it said, there's this casting director wants to know if quote unquote cash flow would read for this role. I was like, well, yeah. If I'll read for it, and if they like it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know until and it turns out it was Tulsa King. I love this show. I love that first season. It was amazing. It was Stallone. I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I went and read. I didn't hear nothing for a little while, and they had said there was a start date when that first email that I got, and they had said you would probably end up flying out on this date. Well, 2 days before this date, I hadn't heard nothing. Guess what? I didn't think I got it, but I wanted to call my agent and make sure. I called my agent. She didn't answer. A couple of days later, she called back, and I was like, okay, she's calling me to say, hey, you don't need to call us. If you got it, we'll let you know. One of those kind of things. Well, that wasn't it. She called me back and said, yes, they want you. Can you be on a plane tomorrow to go to Atlanta? And I said, yeah. I was stoked. And then they said, and before I got off the phone, if you get a phone call from a number in California, it would be in your best interest to answer it. Well, I got that phone call. It was about 15 minutes later, and it ended up being Sly. So wow. It ended up being Stallone, and I, ended up talking to him for about 30, 45 minutes. And, he ended up making me feel like a big piece of that puzzle, so it was a pretty amazing experience. I'll say that. And the rest is history,
Absolutely. One of the the facts about Stallone is that dating back, we all know his iconic role in Rocky with Thunder Lips Hogan, and he's publicly Paradise Alley, et cetera. He's publicly professed his appreciation for the pro wrestling business, even when some people bury it or whatnot. What when you first got on set and were working with him, it must have been a daunting experience, but what was that like during those first scenes where you were introduced into the bar, and was he instrumental in some of those roles that you see of the enforcer, the tough guy? They don't get a lot of if any lines, but your character certainly does have lines, and I'm just wondering how that relates to working with Sly.
Sly was the boss. What he said went, and and it was exactly what he told me on the phone. I'm a huge fan from the Netflix series Wrestlers. He said, kid, you're a star. He said, and this show is going to change your life, is what he told me. And he backed it up, everything that I did on set, and he was just as big a mentor on that set as Al Snow is in the wrestling avenue for me. So, he, say it like this, make sure you keep eye contact. There were a lot of things that, sometimes when we were chatting back and forth, there were sometimes when the camera started rolling, he would say stuff that wasn't scripted and would want a reaction from me to see what I got. And he told me one time, he said, that's how you can tell if somebody is comfortable with a camera, is if they have a script and then you kind of go off yourself and you try to get some kind of reaction out of you. And he said, every time I did that, he said, you were right on the money. He's like, that's how I knew. And he looked out for me, whenever there was a part, he was always considering if I should be there, hey, Cash, instead of standing back there, come stand up here. It was always, and he was the boss. That's all I can say. It was pretty surreal, and I tried to do I tried to be in the moments that I was supposed to be in, he said I was really good at that. So.
Absolutely. As per the mainstream commentary on your performance, did you find, and this is always an interesting juxtaposition of the, not so much the standing around the set and the different pace of, filmmaking as opposed to working in the ring or whatnot, cutting a promo, but the one physical scene that stands out is when Sly rolled up with his crew and there was a big fight scene around the grow op and you were kicking butt and taking names there. Did you, I know Piper commented in the past that it was difficult for him to transition from like working spots to doing action type physicality. What was your experience like in that particular regard?
It was kind of a different experience. I mean, you had to do, it was broken down. When you're doing, that particular type of stunt work, it was broken down in a sense, but you still have, I can't speak for of course, Piper's experience, because I don't know, you watch They Live and or whatever the other stuff that he'd done. But in this particular thing, it was kind of a spot type thing. And you would actually, because we had to spend a week rehearsing what it was we were going to do. Of course, you're not trying to kill any of these stunt guys. Of course, the stunt guys don't want to get killed either. But, but you have to, we spent about a week rehearsing, and then we come to it. And, some things had changed because the director had asked a couple questions. Can you do this? Can you do this? Of course, and getting to know the stunt guys. And of course, the stunt guys got to know me a little bit, and they're like, and they started coming to me like, what do you think about doing, what do you think about this? So it had some spots in it, Jack. But there was some bigger stuff that, you had to stop. And especially, when they're trying to get, reactions, and, they're trying to film from this side as opposed to this, this side or this side, trying to film both sides of it. So, I got the best of both worlds there. I got to see both of that. We had a few spots that we had to run, of course we had a whole lot of stopping and going in different areas. So, was it hard? No. It's just about, paying attention to what it is you're doing and trying to capture the vision that the director or the stunt coordinator, Freddie Poole as a stunt coordinator is amazing, by the way. But trying to capture the vision that they have for you, and then, trying to make it your own, trying to put a little bit of Bigfoot in those stunts, or, a little bit of Cash, or, whoever it was that I was trying to portray at that time. Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's a component that I noticed right off the hop. You're the heavy there, but you could see some of your the Cash wrestler in that character. Did in addition to Sly kind of riffing with you, were you given any sort of freedom? Because you could tell Bigfoot is a monster and an ass kicker, but he's also got some stuff going on upstairs. He's not guttural, the traditional type of heavy in some previous works. Were you given any leeway in that regard to put your own spin on things?
Every role, and I don't know how to put that. Every role, you're gonna interject. In acting, every role you're gonna interject a little bit of who you are or how you perceive that role by the way it is written for you, and that is something that you run with. And if it's too much, they'll pull you back. If it's not enough, they'll want you to do more, or they'll want you to do it in another way. But as far as like micromanaging how I was doing, they never did that, which was a kind of a weird thing for me because, in wrestling, they want to do this a certain way, or they want to do this, in a certain amount of time, or, it was a little more micromanaged in professional wrestling, which is crazy to say. But in this regards, they gave me the leeway. And if it was too much, they would pull me back and we would do it again from another angle. Or if it wasn't enough, or if it wasn't done the way that they wanted, they would say, hey, can you be a little lighter when you're talking to this person? Or, can you do it like this? Or, can you look at the mirror and try to put, you know what I mean? They would kind of give you a little direction to see how you would do it. But they wanted genuine. And the only way that they were going to get genuine is if they let you come up with it, or you do it the way that you felt like it was supposed to be done. And then they would, just kind of nudge you in a direction they thought may be better if it needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, fans, if you haven't checked out Tulsa King, do yourself a favor. Do yourself a favor and binge watch season 1, season 2, even better in my opinion. So 2-part question, Cash, and that's: is there going to be a season 3 to your knowledge? And what do you see for yourself in terms of acting projects in the future? Do you have goals in that industry now that you've really started to make a name for yourself?
Well, I really do have goals. I want to, I want to, it's an industry that I want to, that I want to explore it. I want to have some larger budget movies. I want to have some larger budget roles. I want to be, I want to do an action movie. I want to do some stuff in Marvel. I want to work alongside guys like Jeff Bridges because people say I look like him. I want to explore that side of because it's a natural evolution for a professional wrestler to get into that. Wrestling is where I come from. I believe the other side of that. I believe acting is probably production, and that I believe that's where I'm going. So, I do. And I'm exploring. I've been exploring projects for the last 6 months. So we'll see. We'll see what shakes out.
Well, we've really burned through our hour here, Cash, but where can the fans find you on social media? And is there anywhere else that they need to go to keep on top of all the projects you have ongoing, be it in wrestling or otherwise?
All my social medias are at Cash Flow Wrestler. Every single one of them. You can follow them. You can like them. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there. You can go to chopshopwrestling.com if you want any cool Cash Flow merch. Got some swag on there. And all I can say is about where it's going. You can, keep your eyes on the screen rants and keep your eyes on the entertainment dirt sheets. They'll tell you all you need to know about Tulsa King, because Tulsa King is it's one of the best shows out there. And don't miss the season finale. Watch it all. Binge watch it. It's a really good series. It's well written. The acting in it is top notch, and I was just glad to be a part of it. Here's to many more. About season 3. Hey, Stallone done put it out into the universe. He done said, that the numbers for Tulsa King season 2 are through the roof. He's done said that the team is already fast, working on season 3. There hasn't been any official announcement from Paramount. We'll see. Over the years, I've, because I'm like you, I've been a Stallone fan for a lot of years. He seems to get what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's the case, I'm all for it, because what a ride. Well,
I'd be very surprised if there wasn't, given the success. So I want to thank you for coming on the Great North Wrestling Podcast. And congratulations on all your success. It's good to see a hardworking individual such as yourself who's really put in the miles, as they say in the business, get this level of recognition and hopefully much more to come.
Much appreciated, Jack. And, to all those fans out there, keep your ear to the grind. You never know what you're going to see.
Well, fans, that's it for this special edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. If you haven't, please subscribe to thehannibaltv.com. We're adding subscribers at a record pace, and that's due to content such as this. Make sure you have your notification button, hit all that good stuff, and you won't miss out on great interviews like this. Until then, I am Jack Kilby. See you next time.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us